Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our TMF Group and ICSA webinar for today. Our today's topic is about best practices for subsidiary management during merger and acquisition. I'm very pleased to present today for TMF Group and ICSA on behalf of TMF Group and ICSA. Before to start, we would like to check the audio. So please, if you can answer or comment in the chat box if you are able to hear us at this moment, we will appreciate that. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for the people that have wrote us and confirmed that they can hear you. They can hear us. Once again, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for registering for our webinar hosted kindly by ICSA. My name is Andrea Santana. I'm the regional marketeer for TMF Group. And for today's webinar, it's about best practices for subsidiary management during merger and acquisition. So before we start, I would like to make some housekeeping rules, clarifications, and agenda for today. Please don't forget to submit your questions in the Q&A box located in the right side of the screen. You can do it while the presentation is taking place, and we will try to answer all the questions at the end of the webinar. This webinar is also being recorded, so if you have any issues or technical problems, we will record this presentation and send it the on-demand version to you. In terms of the agenda, as you might already be aware, we are going to share today the practical tips and best practices on managing subsidiaries across Europe, but also some global examples in the decision-making process behind mergers and acquisitions. With that, I would like to introduce you to our expert of today, Yvette van Loon. She's our Regional Commercial Director for TMF Group. Yvette has a Master in Law at the University of Amsterdam and a Master in Law at the University of Pennsylvania. She has more than 15 years of working experience, and she has been able to support companies, especially in the financial services industry, across the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Europe, and recently globally. She has been taking part in a variety of positions in France, like compliance officer, managing director, and today she's in a position of regional commercial director for TMF Group. Since then, she has been able to develop a strong local and global network, supporting companies globally in their expansion process and in the process of the mergers and acquisitions. With that, I would like to thank Yvette for joining us today and be our expert speaker. And I will give the word to you now, Yvette, for your presentation.
Thank you, Andrea, for the introduction and for the ICSA to make this possible. If I go to the next slide, it moves to the next slide. Next, okay. We're here to discuss some mergers and practices before, during, after the process. Most of the presentation is based on my 30 years of experience, and you will also hear some examples I have been involved in. Maybe it's good to start with some background. Your company is in a merger and acquisition mode. Why? There can be various reasons. It can be a useful management tool for finding new value. It allows business units from the merging companies to be brought together smoothly. It allows corporate activities to be standardized and streamlined, and integration synergies to be delivered quickly. And do not forget, which is important nowadays, it allows your shareholders to be satisfied. It sounds easy, right? Is this really the case? especially where the business of the acquirer and the target are global companies and operate internationally. The scale and the number of challenges are increasing. Some common pitfalls I have seen and fallen into myself as well. No back offices are in place in the new markets your company entered into. Global businesses are pressured to realize every opportunity that the market presents. As a result, buyers are constrained by tight acquisition timelines, leading to wrong focus on activities or wrong targets. The legal implications are not really thought through. You might have heard, yeah, we bought just a famous Christmas tree of 48 entities. You are not yet compliant, as you are still recovering from the previous acquisition, which took place 6 months ago. So compliance risks are increasing. And do not forget, it seems everybody nowadays has an own agenda. In short, not as easy as it looks. Now I need to go to the... There you go. There are a number of other challenges. And I think an important one is the lack of cultural understanding and local knowledge. And as a result, the parties don't understand each other or might miss out on important points to ease the whole merger and acquisition process. I'm based in France, and I can tell you, no, the French don't like the Dutch-style sandwiches with buttermilk for lunch, or the speed of doing business the American way. And do you know what you are exactly acquiring? Are it 48 entities, 47? Is it clear? Do you know where you have to set up new entities, open new bank accounts? Who are your available resources internally? I have seen that my day-to-day contact person who was involved in the merger and acquisition process tend to isolate herself from her day-to-day and contact with me, resulting in feelings of tension, and the standard work doesn't get the attention it needs, again with increased risks. I mentioned you need to open bank accounts. Well, it seems that nowadays banks are becoming more and more risk adverse. Bank account openings can take up to 3 months. I might hear you think now, yeah, no, I don't need to open a bank account when I incorporate a new entity. Well, there are plenty of jurisdictions in the world where you do need to open a bank account to set up a new entity. And this might delay the whole process. And also, do you know, a lot of countries have work councils in place who are often not always in favor of your merger and acquisitions, especially if you are for two different parts of the world. Don't forget, we discussed today mostly around subsidiary management and COSEC. About that you need a local resident director in Switzerland, and that sometimes these directors might have to hold 1 share in the company, or that all the documents need to be held and filed in the local language. How will you know if you're compliant if you cannot read the documents of your local entity? Do you know where your corporate documents are of the companies you are acquiring? Yes, they should have been kept at the registered office. Unfortunately, I have seen so many times already that nobody seems to know where they are, especially if you have acquired companies who have been incorporated long before the digital age. And no, most civil law countries do not know a company secretary. How many times I have been asked this question, who is the company secretary? Well, we don't have one in these civil law countries. And also the famous CHOP. I had to look it up on Wikipedia. What is a CHOP? Well, a CHOP is commonly used in most Asian countries and is for us like a company stamp. It is something compulsory, and almost all documents your directors will be signing over there. So it doesn't sound easy, and the world doesn't stop there. How should you prepare in this moving world? There are several truths about global compliance. I already mentioned, it seems compliance is difficult and getting harder. Organizations need more and more a compliance framework. Sometimes it is better to outsource compliance functions, sometimes it's not. Compliance mistakes can cause real damage. You can lose licenses or permits. Directors might be held liable. The fine line between the present and the future never looked so blurry. Some of the global trends currently going on are data privacy, cybersecurity, ethics, anti-bribery, being Sharia law compliant. You can name it. An example here in Europe is that there has been an increased focus on the need for transparency in businesses, especially in relation to ownership and tax requirements. Many governments have set this up by way of more openness around formal reporting of beneficial ownerships. A key example of this is the introduction of the fourth anti-money laundering directive from the European Union. The difficulty is that each member state can determine how to implement the directive. And in doing so, member states have taken different approaches, but also set up different penalties. So there is no one size fits all. How do you manage? You finally think you can keep track of all that, and then your company jumps into another merger and acquisition deal. They have to act fast. It's a one of a lifetime opportunity. How do you go through this? How do you experience this? And you find yourself, again, maybe in the middle of a transaction agreement negotiation. The deal is hot. Clearly, there is a difference between making acquisitions and making it work, is my own experience. As already stated several times, there is often not much time left. Speed is of essence, and often to make things sometimes worse, there is even a reward for a faster exit in the transaction documents. Wow. Many people involved, resulting in a fragmented view. Where does this leave you as the lawyer? Or where does that leave me as sometimes the coordination person from a TMF perspective? Often only look at current state, those deals, and often focus on only a couple of areas. And often the question of if corporate housekeeping of the 48 entities you're buying has been well done is not one of them. And also, legal and tax might not always match. What you want as a lawyer might be withheld by colleagues. You are often seen as a necessary evil. In my time, when I worked for the real estate business of one of the large American investment banks, that was definitely the case. Another example I have just been involved in is a carve-out in France from a large public company to a small private company, and it involved only 130 employees. It is a complex payroll due to the applicable collective bargaining agreement here in France. It is resulting in a huge time-consuming transfer for all parties involved, and even outside assistance has been hired to manage the transition. The buyer has luckily negotiated a 2-year transition period, and the seller, the public company, will continue to run the payroll on their specific adapted payroll software So the buyer will be fully up to speed and compliant to take over the payroll in 2 years' time. At least that was the thought. We are now wondering if this will be enough. Overall, it seems much more complex and time-consuming than expected. My advice is be generous to yourself in the negotiations and transitions, and especially when buying companies who form part of government-owned public companies. This all might also complicate cross-border mergers, where, as I already mentioned, where councils might be involved, different legal systems, and where certain processes have to be involved or are in place, which you have to follow. And you might find yourself not only negotiating with the seller, but also with these work councils in a country like, for example, France, where you don't even have a presence, let alone speak the language. Oh. Does it go? I have a little problem in getting to the next slide. Oh yeah, here it goes. The ink is dry, and then the process designs begin. What are you looking at? Are you looking for a unified global approach? Are you looking to focus and optimize the resources you have in-house, or maybe outsource? You encourage internal collaboration and integration. You try, but you have to deal with APEC, Americas, and in the middle, you're kind of squeezed because you're based in EMEA. You like to introduce global processes. You try to standardize formalities. To approach projects in manageable chunks and identify in-house outsourcers' expertise need to be cost effectively complete. It might well be that you consider automation as a solution for the future. You would try to embrace our digital future, and maybe a data entity management system might be the solution. And it goes without saying, you try to identify areas of risk. I have mentioned already some in my presentation. Don't forget, one size doesn't fit all to control these risks. What I sometimes see is that in-house lawyers responsible for the corporate housekeeping might not fully be completely involved in the deal. Means risks are not always identified on time. I have been involved in a real estate deal where 48 entities in 6 countries were bought via share deal. A strict transaction date was set, and on that date, I tell you, it was the 1st of October, the address of the entity needed changed, the directors of the entity needed changed, the accounting and tax needed to be taken over as of that date, all the corporate records per country needed to be transferred to TMF on that date as well. Don't forget, that all had to take place on the same date. It was a very stressful experience on one side. On the other hand, this was a very clear cut and clean exit and no transition whatsoever. This could only be done if there is a great coordination by all parties involved. And if there is one dedicated person on each side who follows up internally and coordinates internally. And as mentioned, there are no loose ends because of this. Then you all have signed and you're in the post-acquisition integration mode. When you have here all this and the integration starts not only at payroll and on accounting and tax level, but also on corporate level, and you continue doing your corporate housekeeping, we can assist with all. I hear what you're thinking. Yes, all our due diligence. Yes, I know. We were unable to complete our project on time, as we didn't have employees on the ground who could act as a director. Oh, yes, there was this one share in country X held by an employee who was left, and we couldn't trace the employee as he needed to sign the transfer form, all causing huge delays. We are there to assist, to provide you with practical solutions to these annoying topics. If you want a strong international compliance program for your newly acquired company, you might consider to check the health of your new entities. Have the seller kept up with all the necessary filings? You don't want to be trapped by this one employee who hasn't transferred his one share. You don't want to discover that the director, who was not changed, is no longer with the company, or even worse, has deceased. We can help you with this to discover any discrepancies. Health checks conducted by TMF can match and review all entity information from local public records, local statutory records, and international corporate databases. So you get a complete picture. We will provide you with a report with all the identified discrepancies. Oh, here. Oh. Our solutions once in a clear overview. There are many essential tasks that come with acquiring new entities. We are there to help and solve the business challenges we discussed during this webinar. And I tell you, there are many more. These are all with the goal to keep you compliant, reduce your risk, and increase your value and speed up the M&A process. I would like to discuss as the near end of the presentation some of the case studies in which TMF has been involved. As you can see, it are often multinational companies operating in various countries, maybe before they did M&A, and found themselves afterwards 3 times bigger. We could assist them with the corporate secretarial and the accounting and tax. And by this way, reduce the transaction time. There was another one, a Japanese company, where we also assist them. They had a huge challenge because also they more than doubled in size, had a lot of employees around the globe, and which all needed to be transferred to the new companies. The next slide gives some short examples where we have been involved. It comes all back to that you stay compliant, that you reduce your risk, increase your value, and speed up the whole M&A process. We assist you with your back office so you can focus on other things for these deals, and you can sleep calmly that at least your corporate housekeeping will be done. This leads me to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you for your support and would like to ask if there are any questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Yvette. As you have mentioned, there is time for a Q&A. We have received a couple of questions so far, but please use the right box, the chat box on the right screen, so you can submit it. In the meantime, I would really like to thank you, Yvette, for your presentation and for participating today with us. As well, I would like to thank ICSA, the Governance Institute, for being able to host this webinar for us today, and for supporting in the organization. I think we have one question, Yvette, that I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, but Shardon asked us, what about shared international drives where corporate records of various entities are kept? I'm not sure if I understand correctly, but I don't know if you are able to answer that question, or perhaps we will contact Susan individually to understand better.
Yeah, you could. I think you could answer this in two ways. You nowadays have data management entity systems, management data entity systems. For example, like Blueprint, where you have shared files. I'm not sure if she refers to that, or you set up a simply, which you see with large law firms nowadays, that there are shared drives, especially in where due diligence is taking place. So I'm not sure what she's exactly meaning, if it's one or the other.
Okay, yeah, I think we will contact her individually.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone. If you have, in the meantime, before we finish, I would really like to invite you to download our latest compliance complexity index, which will support a lot of the information that Yvette has shared today in the webinar. This report is comparing 85 countries around the world in terms of compliance complexity. So I invite you to download the report and see if you're interested in a specific market. As I mentioned, it's 85 countries in APAC, Americas, US, Latin America, where you can find information about the compliance in each country. Additionally, I would like to invite you to contact us if you have any questions, any other questions related to your process of M&A. As Yvette mentioned, we have a lot of experience in supporting compliance officers, risk managers, chief legal officers during their process of M&A. And if you have any other additional questions besides the on Yvette's presentation, just feel free to contact us for that. To close, I would really like to thank again ICSA. Thank you, Yvette, once again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will circulate the slides as you have already asked for them, and we also will distribute the on-demand webinar. With that, I would like to conclude the webinar. And we wish you from TMF Group and on behalf of ICSA, we wish you a good afternoon.